All right, for our last reader is Susan Friedland. She's an author and horsewoman who still believes in the magic of a great childhood book. Her memoir, Marguerite, Misty, and Me, explores the life and literary legacy of the writer Marguerite Henry. She also writes for the equine industry, co-hosts the Barn Banter podcast, and makes visits to schools where she talks about writing. So please welcome her up to the mic.
Well, that is going to be a very tough act to follow. My phone is on silent. But it's a delight to be here and to introduce you to my very favorite author, Marguerite Henry. Are any of you familiar? Have you heard of Misty of Chincoteague, King of the Wind? So for those of you who are uninitiated, Marguerite Henry was a prolific author of children's books. She wrote 60 titles, many of them from her home in nearby Wayne. And Misty of Chincoteague is kind of her most notable work. You probably can't see the picture, but her first horse she got in order to research to write the book Misty of Chincoteague. And so I picked up this copy in 2018 of Misty, my very favorite childhood book, and went down the very nerdy rabbit hole of archival research and trying to connect with people who knew her. So the excerpt from my horse lover and history lover memoir, Marguerite, Misty, and Me, that I'm going to read is about when she got this foal from Chincoteague Island, which there's a herd of wild ponies that live on Assateague Island in Virginia, and every year they swim them to shore, and that's kind of the plot line of Misty. So she had to travel from Illinois to Virginia and see one of the ponies, and the rest is history. A Palomino Pinto foal Marguerite encountered during her first research trip to Chincoteague captured her heart and imagination. The first time I saw Misty, the tiny filly, was new as the morning and silky as milkweed floss. Marguerite's travel companion, Wayne horsewoman Blondie Coffin, was tasked with the role of helping Marguerite select a suitable pony to bring home. There is no indication from any archival documents or personal accounts of folks I interviewed that Blondie had any say in Marguerite selecting Misty. The writer laid her eyes on a silver and gold foal lying beneath her mother, and she instantly fell in love. The deal struck between Marguerite and Clarence Beebe, the man simply known as Grandpa Beebe in the storybook, was that once weaned, the filly would be shipped to Illinois to live with Marguerite and serve as her writing inspiration. They agreed Misty would eventually return to the Beebe Ranch to be bred and have foals. Marguerite and Grandpa shook hands, and with $150 paid by Rand McNally, Marguerite's publisher, the pony became Marguerite's. The Henrys did not yet have a barn on their 2-acre property in the village of Wayne. It's on Army Trail Road. The house is still there today. But that didn't stop Marguerite from getting the pony. Her neighbors, the Quayle family, agreed to let Misty stay in their barn. Misty arrived in St. Charles, Illinois via train car on a cold November day in 1946, the year before the book Misty debuted. A pictorial life story of Misty, published in 1976, retraces the earliest moments of Marguerite and Misty as a pair, showing a photograph of a bundled up Marguerite sitting in deep straw, cradling the just weaned filly's head as she slept. Upon the foal's arrival, Marguerite and her neighborhood friends were concerned the shaggy creature wasn't the same filly selected just a few months earlier in July. In fact, Sidney, Marguerite's husband, who, by the way, had a 5 and dime store in Geneva, which there's a jeweler there now, I believe it's on 3rd Street. Sidney teased Marguerite about Misty's appearance, stating that she looked like a Siberian goat. Marguerite turned her head to hide her tears, wondering if Grandpa Beebe had sent her the wrong pony. Her thick winter fuzz lacked the golden vibrance of her newborn coat. Nevertheless, the weary filly, who had spent 4 days on a train in a standing stall of a crate needed TLC. Despite what Marguerite considered a mix-up, she was determined to care for the filly with a runny nose who barely ate a few bites of hay. Marguerite spent the night in the quail's barn in the stall with the fuzzy newcomer, with a blanket wrapped around her as raindrops tapped on the roof and an owl trilled, hoo, hoo. Marguerite tried humming to elicit a response from her. The pony ignored her all night. However, as the inky blackness gave way to gray morning, Marguerite heard the rustle of straw. Misty approached her. She lay down next to Marguerite. And Marguerite wrote, "Her whiskers brushed my palm, then her muzzle was cradled in my hand. Her animal warmth felt good as she squirmed closer. I was no longer cold. The rain stopped, and we slept." When spring arrived, Misty's winter coat shed out, the unmistakable white marking on her withers resembling a map of the United States appeared, as did the patch on her right side in the shape of Virginia. Grandpa Beebe had indeed shipped the right foal. A local horse trainer, Eddie Pecuna, started Misty to be a riding pony. Besides being trained to ground drive and later accept a rider, Misty learned tricks. The Henrys taught her to extend a hoof and a horsey handshake and to step her 2 hooves on a stool and pose. As Misty of Chincoteague book royalties rolled in, a 3-stall barn was constructed in 1948, and that's still there too. In the wake of Misty's success, the real Misty blossomed into a media celebrity. She appeared at schools, libraries, book signings, and parties. She even appeared at the 1949 American Library Association convention in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I paged through a scrapbook bound with a ribbon featuring a headshot on the cover of Misty as a foal while researching this book at the Curlin Collection Archives at the University of Minnesota. The first page begins with, "Wee, I am 2 years old today. My birthday began with a hearty handshake." Marguerite wrote all the captions from the filly's point of view. A photo of Marguerite and the hooved birthday honoree facing each other just inches apart shows Marguerite gripping the Misty's pastern. That's what the photo is, the cover of my book. Its caption reads, "Notice the map on my withers?" The next page said, "I had a party. You should have seen the presents. There were carrots scrubbed clean and a box of sugar lumps, a bundle of hay, and a sheaf of oats tied with a gold ribbon." The thin blade topped with the oats sporting a small ribbon near its base is still taped to the page of that scrapbook that is still at the archives at the University of Minnesota. After opening presents wrapped in paper, covered with galloping horses, several children rode Misty. And she wrote that Misty did a little bucking and kicking so that the children would know there was still wildness left in her. But the grown-ups who watched thought it was maybe a gnat or a horsefly. The last page of the scrapbook is a signed guest list with the names of 11 neighborhood children from Wayne, some penned in cursive, some in giant scrawling letters of those learning to write. The average age of attendees was 6.5 years old. Mary John Quayle, Johnny, was one of the party attendees. When I interviewed her for this book and we spoke on the phone, she said, "I loved Marguerite Henry," and that when she was 5, she would walk over to Marguerite's house all the time. She wouldn't knock, she would just walk right in. And she informed me that she was the first person ever who rode Misty. You can see the picture of this future equestrian in a pictorial life story of Misty. Even though Johnny was the first person atop Misty, she said she did not ride Misty at the birthday party because the pony was not that well trained. But Johnny painted a picture of her hometown Wayne and her author friend. Wayne was heaven to grow up in. Everyone in Wayne had a horse. That's the way it was. Misty stayed in our pasture. My sister Nancy and I would hop on and ride her bareback without permission. She wasn't famous then. She was just a little horse growing up in our pasture with our other horses. And Mrs. Henry ate at the country club for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I once asked my mother, how come we don't get to do that? And my mom said, she's famous. Mrs. Henry doesn't have children, so she doesn't need to make the meals. When I asked Johnny if she knew that Mrs. Henry was famous, she replied, "No, I just knew she was this wonderful, nice lady who lived next door and who always ate at the club, and she used to pay me a quarter to make her bed." Johnny laughed and wondered aloud if Marguerite unmade the bed in order to give the neighbor girl a little something to do. Johnny recalled Wesley Dennis, who was the illustrator that paired up with Marguerite, being at the farm, sketching Jiggs, their donkey, for Bridie of the Grand Canyon, another classic book she wrote. Johnny took home the drafts of Wesley's art that were deemed unusable, and she still has them today. Early in my research, I found a 1951 Rand McNally and Company ad promoting the book Album of Horses in the Chicago Daily Tribune. It posed the question, what makes Marguerite Henry's books about horses so popular with children? The ad continues. Beneath the question is a photograph of a smiling Marguerite with her right hand waving hello from atop Misty, whose hooves are on a stool. The ad continues, Marguerite Henry has what her sister calls her feeling of oneness with young things. She never writes or talks down to them. Whether she is currying a colt or chatting with a 10-year-old, she treats each with affection and respect. You can get some idea of her popularity with children from the fact that the neighborhood boys bicycle 8 miles for the privilege of cleaning her stable, mucking stalls. One suspects that the secret of her success in writing about horses comes of having been born an unusually nice human being. I felt the warmth Marguerite exuded, and I wondered about the identity of the neighborhood boys who clamored to clean stalls. Would our paths ever cross? I wish I had met this unusually nice human being. I had so many questions to ask her about horses and herself. I know we could have been friends. And by the way, I did, through small town, got the identity of one of those boys that rode his bike 8 miles from Elgin to Wayne. He lives in Wyoming now, and he's in his 80s. Thank you so much.